I need to tell someone what I did, and you're going to think I'm terrible, but there's something about what happened that night that nobody understands. Everyone's been sending me messages calling me toxic, telling me I'm the worst kind of girlfriend, that I emasculated someone who loved me. And maybe they're right. But what they don't know, what I haven't told anyone until right now, is that the comment he overheard wasn't even the worst thing I said that night. Not by a long shot. If I don't tell this story the right way, you'll just see me as another cruel woman who destroyed a good man's confidence. But once you know what I know, once you understand the full context of our relationship and what led up to that moment, you'll see why everything is so much more complicated than a single overheard comment. I'm going to tell you everything, including the parts that make me look absolutely horrible. The things I said after he left. The real reason I was complaining to my friends in the first place. And the part that makes me look worst, I'm saving that for near the end because you need to understand who Jake and I were together first. We'd been dating for 2 years when it happened. Jake was the kind of guy everyone loved, sweet, attentive, always remembering little details about my day. He'd text me good morning before I even woke up. He'd surprise me with my favorite coffee order. My friends all said I was lucky that guys like him were rare. And I agreed, I really did. The problem started so gradually I didn't even notice it at first. It was little things. Like how he'd always ask what I wanted to watch on Netflix but then look slightly disappointed no matter what I chose. Or how he'd suggest we go to dinner and when I'd say where. He'd respond wherever you want, but I could feel this weird pressure behind it, like there was a right answer and a wrong answer and I was being tested. I started to feel like I was making every single decision in our relationship, where we ate, what we did on weekends, when we saw his parents versus mine, whether we stayed in or went out. And the thing is, I never asked to be in charge of everything. I would have loved for him to just make a plan sometimes, Just say we're going here, wear something nice instead of this endless whatever you want babe routine. But I didn't say anything because I knew how it would sound. How do you complain that your boyfriend is too accommodating, that he's too nice? My friends would have killed to have someone so considerate. Then the bedroom stuff started becoming an issue. I hate even talking about this part because it feels like such a betrayal, but you need to know. Jake was a considerate lover in the same way he was considerate about everything else, almost to a fault. He was always checking in, always asking if I was okay, if I liked what he was doing. Which sounds good on paper, right? Except it got to the point where I felt like I was directing a movie instead of having sex. And he'd finish fast, really fast, like embarrassingly fast sometimes. At first, I told myself it didn't matter because he'd always make sure I was satisfied afterward. He'd go down on me or use his hands, and he was actually pretty good at it. But there was something about the whole dynamic that started to bother me. The sex itself felt like this rushed thing he was getting out of the way. And then the real work of pleasing me would begin, and I could feel his anxiety radiating off him the entire time, like he was taking an exam he was terrified of failing. I tried to be understanding. I read articles about performance anxiety. I initiated conversations about how we could relax more, take the pressure off. But Jake would get this wounded look in his eyes like I'd kicked a puppy and insist everything was fine, that he just got excited because he found me so attractive. How do you argue with that? So I stopped bringing it up. I faked more enthusiasm than I felt. I reassured him constantly. And I felt this growing resentment building inside me that I couldn't talk to him about because he was just so damn nice about everything. The night it all fell apart was supposed to be a good night. My friends Melissa and Rachel were coming over for wine and catch-up, while Jake went out with his buddies to watch some game at a bar. We'd done this arrangement dozens of times before. It was our thing, give each other space to decompress with friends. Jake left around 7. Kissing my forehead and reminding me not to stay up too late because I'd mentioned I had an early meeting the next day. See? Thoughtful, always thoughtful. And somehow even that felt suffocating. The girls arrived around 7:30 with 3 bottles of wine and a lot of work gossip to unload. We settled into our usual spots in the living room, and for the first hour or so, we talked about Rachel's nightmare boss and Melissa's dating app disasters. I was already 2 glasses in when Melissa started talking about the guy she'd gone home with the previous weekend. And oh my god, she said, laughing. We went for like an hour. I literally had to tap out. I was like, dude, I have a spin class in the morning. I cannot keep going. Rachel snorted into her wine. An hour, girl, my legs would give out. Right, like it was good, but also I was doing mental calculations about whether I'd be too sore to sit at my desk tomorrow. They were both cracking up and I found myself laughing too, but there was this bitter taste in my mouth that had nothing to do with the wine. Must be nice, I said, and I meant it to sound joking, but it came out sharper than I intended. Melissa caught it immediately. Uh-oh, trouble in paradise? I should have deflected. I should have changed the subject. But the wine had loosened something in me, and I was so tired of pretending everything was perfect. I mean, Jake is great, I started, which is how you know someone's about to trash talk their partner. He's so great, but like, I don't know, sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be with someone who just lasted longer. The words hung in the air for a second. Rachel and Melissa exchanged glances. Oh honey, are we talking about stamina issues? Rachel asked, leaning forward with that gleeful expression people get when the conversation turns to bedroom problems that aren't theirs. And just like that, the floodgates opened. It's not even just that he finishes fast, I said, pouring myself another glass. It's that the whole thing feels so, I don't know, unconfident, like he's afraid to just take charge and be a man about it. Wait, so he's like asking permission for everything? Melissa asked. Everything, is this okay, do you like this, should I do this instead? I'm like, babe, just do something, anything, make a decision for once in your life. They were nodding sympathetically, which encouraged me to keep going. And the worst part is I can't even talk to him about it because he's so sensitive. He gets this look like I'm destroying him and then I feel like a monster and nothing changes. How fast are we talking? Rachel asked. Like ballpark. I held up my hand and counted on my fingers. 2 minutes, 3 on a good day? Oh no, Melissa said. Oh yes, I said. And then he's so concerned with making sure I finish that it becomes this whole clinical thing where I'm lying there being like, yep, doing great, almost there, while thinking about my grocery list. We all laughed and God, it felt good to finally say it out loud. To not be the understanding girlfriend for once, to just be honest about how frustrating it all was. You know what I read somewhere, I said, and I was definitely slurring a little now. Real men last longer. Like it's literally a measure of self-control and maturity. Teenage boys finish in 2 minutes. Grown men have discipline. Preach, Rachel said, raising her glass. I'm just saying I love Jake, but sometimes I wonder if I'm settling. Like, is this really what I want for the rest of my life? A guy who can't last longer than a commercial break? That's when I heard it. The sound of keys hitting the floor in the hallway. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might throw up. We all froze and I turned to see Jake standing in the doorway to the living room, his face completely white. His keys were at his feet where he'd apparently dropped them. His jacket was still on. Jake, I said, scrambling up from the couch, wine sloshing onto my hand. I didn't you're home early. He didn't say anything. He just stared at me with this expression I'd never seen before, not angry, worse than angry, devastated, hollow. The game got cancelled, he said quietly. Pipe burst at the bar. I texted you but I guess you didn't see. I grabbed for my phone and sure enough, there it was, a text from 40 minutes ago. I'd been so caught up in the conversation I hadn't even noticed. Jake, listen, we were just 2 minutes, he said. That's what you think of me, 2 minutes. Melissa and Rachel had gone completely silent behind me. The air in the room felt thick and poisonous. We were just venting, it wasn't. Real men last longer, he repeated, and his voice cracked on the word men. Real men, so what does that make me? That's not what I meant. You told them you're settling, that you wonder if you want this for the rest of your life. He laughed, but it was this awful broken sound. Good to know how you really feel. Jake, please, I was drunk and frustrated, I didn't mean. But he was already turning around, picking up his keys from the floor. He moved like he was in a dream, slow and disconnected. I'm going to stay at my brother's, he said without looking at me. Don't leave, we should talk about this. Talk. He spun around and there it was, the anger finally breaking through. You couldn't talk to me about this, you had to tell your friends that I'm not a real man, that you're settling for me. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I asked you so many times if you were happy, if everything was okay, and you said yes. You looked me in the eye and said everything was fine. The truth of that hit me like a slap. He was right, he'd asked multiple times and I'd lied. I didn't know how to tell you, I whispered. So you told them instead. He gestured at Melissa and Rachel, who both looked like they wanted to disappear into the couch. You made me into a joke for your girls' night. It wasn't like that, a 2-minute man who can't make a decision. A guy you're settling for, that's who I am to you. No, Jake, you're so much more than that. I'm going, he said, and this time his voice was flat, empty. Don't call me tonight, I just can't. He walked out. The door closed behind him with this terrible quiet click, not even a slam. A slam would have been better. A slam would have meant there was still passion, still something to work with. Instead, there was just silence. I stood there staring at the closed door for what felt like hours but was probably 30 seconds. Behind me I heard Melissa stand up. Sweetie, she started. You guys should go, I said. We can stay, we can help you, please just go. They gathered their things in awkward silence and left, both of them hugging me on the way out, murmuring apologies that didn't help anything. Then I was alone in the apartment Jake and I shared, surrounded by our furniture and our photos and our life together, and all I could think about was the look on his face. I texted him around midnight, I'm so sorry. Please come home so we can talk. No response. I tried calling at 1 a.m. It went straight to voicemail. I lay in our bed in one of his t-shirts that I always wore to sleep, staring at the ceiling and replaying every word I'd said. The worst part was that I'd meant all of it. In that moment, drunk and uninhibited, I'd meant every single criticism. But hearing it reflected back through his devastated expression made me realize how cruel it all sounded. How reductive. I'd taken this complicated, kind, loving man and boiled him down to his worst 30 seconds. I'd shared our most intimate problems with people who didn't love him, who didn't see all the ways he showed up for me. I thought about all the times he'd held me when I cried about work stress. The way he'd learned to make my mom's chicken soup recipe when I was sick. How he'd spent an entire weekend helping me move my grandma into assisted living, dealing with her meanness and confusion with endless patience. But none of that mattered now, because he'd never be able to unhear what I'd said. Those words were burned into his brain forever. 2 minutes, not a real man, settling. I finally fell asleep around 4 a.m. and woke up to my phone ringing at 7. It was Jake's brother Marcus. Hey, Marcus said, his voice careful. Jake's here. He told me what happened. Is he okay? Honestly, no, he's pretty messed up. I've never seen him like this. Guilt twisted in my stomach. Can I talk to him? He's not ready, but he asked me to call and tell you he needs some space. A few days at least. A few days, my voice came out panicked. Marcus, I need to apologize. I need to. Look, I like you, you know that, but what you said was really fucked up. He's questioning everything right now. About himself, about you guys, about whether he's enough. He is enough. I don't think I'm the one you need to convince, Marcus said. But give him time. He'll reach out when he's ready. He hung up, and I sat there in bed feeling like the worst person alive. I called in sick to work. I couldn't imagine sitting in a meeting pretending to care about quarterly projections when my relationship was imploding. Instead, I spent the day obsessively checking my phone and replaying the conversation with my friends. What I haven't told you yet, what I've been avoiding, is what I said after Jake left. After Melissa and Rachel gathered their things right before they walked out the door, Rachel turned to me and said, "You know, maybe this is actually a good thing. Maybe you needed to be honest about what you're not getting." And I can't believe I said this. I responded, I mean, yeah. I can't spend the rest of my life faking orgasms and pretending I'm satisfied with missionary that barely lasts through one song. Melissa had laughed, actually laughed, and I laughed too. Then they left and I was alone with what I'd done, but those words were out there. And the worst part, I'd felt relieved saying them. Validated. Like I'd finally given myself permission to admit that my relationship wasn't perfect. The next few days were torture. Jake wouldn't answer my calls or respond to my texts beyond single-word acknowledgments that he was fine and needed more time. My friends kept checking in, and I realized I was getting two very different types of messages. From Melissa and Rachel, "How are you holding up? Do you want to talk? Remember that you were just being honest about your needs." From Jake's friends who'd somehow heard about it, "Wow, can't believe you said that stuff, poor Jake." I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. I kept cycling between feeling like I'd been justified in venting my frustrations and feeling like the cruelest person who'd ever lived. On day 4, I finally got a real text from Jake. "Can you meet me at the apartment tonight at 7? We need to talk." My heart leaped and sank at the same time. We need to talk. Nothing good ever followed those words. He arrived exactly at 7, looking exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he'd lost weight in just 4 days. He sat down on the couch, our couch, where we'd watched hundreds of movies together, and looked at me like I was a stranger. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he started. "Jake, before you say anything, I need to apologize. What I said was horrible and reductive," and he held up his hand. "Let me talk first, please." I nodded, my throat tight. "You weren't wrong," he said quietly. "What? About the sex stuff? About me not lasting long? About asking you for constant validation?" "You weren't wrong about any of it." He looked down at his hands. "I have performance anxiety. I've had it since my first girlfriend told me I was bad in bed, and instead of dealing with it, I just carried it into every relationship after that, including ours. Jake, and I knew you were frustrated. I could feel it even when you said everything was fine. But I was too scared to really push the conversation because then I'd have to face the fact that I wasn't satisfying you." He finally looked up at me and his eyes were wet. "So in a way I trapped you. I asked if you were happy but made it impossible for you to actually tell me the truth. This wasn't what I'd expected. I'd prepared for anger, for blame, for him to tell me I was a terrible person, not this." "That doesn't excuse what I said," I whispered. "The way I said it, making fun of you to my friends." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't. That's the part I can't get past. Not the honesty about our sex life. I mean, that hurt, but it's true. It's the fact that you made me into a joke, that you talked about me like I was this pathetic thing you were stuck with, that you said real men last longer, like I'm somehow less than because I have a problem I've been struggling with." Tears were streaming down my face now. "I'm so sorry. I was drunk and frustrated and I said things I didn't mean the way they came out." "But you did mean them," he said. "On some level. You think you're settling for me." "I don't, Jake. You're so much more than—" "See, that's the thing," he interrupted. "I am more than my performance in bed. I know that. I'm a good partner in a lot of ways. But the fact that you could reduce me to just that one thing, even for a moment, even drunk, it makes me wonder if you ever really saw all of me or just the parts that were convenient." The accusation stung because it was true. In my frustration, I had reduced him. I'd focused so much on what wasn't working that I'd lost sight of what was. "I love you," I said desperately. "I love so many things about you." "I love you too," he said, and somehow that made it worse. But I don't know if that's enough anymore. I don't know if I can be with someone who I'll always worry is comparing me to some ideal in her head, who's wondering if real men do it differently. I'll never say anything like that again, I swear. It's not about whether you say it. It's about whether you think it. He stood up and I felt panic rising in my chest. I think we need to take a real break, not just a few days, like a month at least. Time to really figure out if this is what we both want. A break, the word came out choked. Jake, please, we can work on this. I need to work on me first, he said. I need to deal with my own issues without constantly worrying about whether I'm measuring up. And you need to figure out if you actually want to be with me or if you're just comfortable. I want to be with you. You said you were settling. You said you wondered if this was what you wanted for the rest of your life. His voice was gentle but firm. Those thoughts don't just go away because you feel bad about saying them out loud. He was right, and I hated that he was right. I'm going to stay at Marcus's for a while, he continued. I'll come get more of my stuff this weekend when you're at your sister's, and then, we'll see, maybe in a month we can meet up and talk about whether there's still something here worth fighting for. There is, I said through tears. I know there is. He gave me the sad smile. I hope you're right. Then he left again, and this time it felt more final. The first week after that conversation was a blur of crying and self-recrimination. I dissected every moment of our relationship, every conversation. Had I been settling, or had I just let my frustrations overshadow all the good things? My friends had divided opinions. Melissa thought Jake was being too sensitive, that he couldn't handle a woman being honest about her needs. Rachel was more diplomatic but essentially agreed that I'd been justified in venting. My other friends, the ones who knew Jake better, were less sympathetic. My best friend from college, Tara, was the most blunt. You humiliated him. You took something vulnerable and private and turned it into entertainment for your friends. I love you, but that was cruel. I started seeing a therapist. Not couples therapy, Jake wasn't ready for that, but individual therapy to figure out my own stuff. And there was a lot of stuff. Turns out I had a pattern. In every relationship I'd ever been in, I'd found something to fixate on as the problem. With my ex before Jake, it was that he was too focused on his career. With the guy before that, it was that he wasn't ambitious enough. There was always something that became the reason I felt justified in my dissatisfaction. My therapist asked me a question that haunted me. Do you think maybe you focus on these flaws because it's safer than being vulnerable enough to be fully happy? I didn't have an answer. Meanwhile, Jake had started seeing a therapist too. I only knew this because Marcus mentioned it in passing when I ran into him at the grocery store. Marcus said Jake was really working on himself, dealing with some deep-seated insecurity issues. He's different, Marcus told me. More confident somehow, even though he's miserable about you guys. That hurt in a way I couldn't quite articulate. Jake was improving himself during our break, becoming the person I'd supposedly wanted him to be, and I wasn't there to see it. 3 weeks into our month-long break, I went out with Melissa and some other friends. We ended up at a bar and a guy started hitting on me. He was attractive in that obvious way, tall, muscular, confident. The kind of guy who definitely didn't ask permission for every move. My friends were encouraging me to flirt back. You're on a break, Melissa said. And honestly, maybe you need to see what else is out there. Remember what you said about real men? I flirted. I let him buy me a drink. I laughed at his jokes even though they weren't that funny. And the whole time I felt absolutely nothing. No spark, no interest, just this hollow feeling and a wish that I was home in my sweatpants watching TV. When the guy asked for my number, I told him I had a boyfriend. I thought you were on a break, Melissa said after he left. I am, but I'm not interested in anyone else. She rolled her eyes. You're going to take him back and nothing's going to change and you're going to end up having this same problem in 5 years. Maybe she was right. Or maybe she was wrong. But I realized in that moment that I didn't care what Melissa thought. She didn't know Jake the way I did. She'd only heard about the worst parts, the parts I'd chosen to share in moments of frustration. The full month mark came and Jake texted, "Are you free tomorrow night? Maybe we could get dinner and talk." I spent the entire next day anxious and nauseous. I changed outfits 4 times. I rehearsed what I wanted to say. I prepared myself for the possibility that this dinner was going to be him officially ending things. We met at a quiet Italian restaurant we'd been to before, back when things were good. Jake looked better than he had in weeks. The dark circles were gone. He got a haircut. There was something different in the way he carried himself. We made awkward small talk for a few minutes before he finally said, "So I've been doing a lot of work on myself." Marcus mentioned, "I'm glad." I started seeing a sex therapist specifically, dealing with the performance anxiety stuff. And I've realized a lot of it stems from childhood stuff. My dad was really critical and I internalized this belief that I was never good enough at anything. He paused, including intimacy. Jake, I never thought you weren't good enough, but I did, and that became a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more anxious I got, the worse the problem became. He looked at me directly. My therapist said something interesting. She said that in some relationships, one partner's anxiety pairs with another partner's criticism in a way that reinforces both patterns. I felt my defenses rising. Are you saying this is my fault? No, I'm saying we fed into each other's worst patterns. My neediness made you feel suffocated. Your criticism made me more insecure, round and round. He wasn't wrong. I thought about all the times I'd given him a tight smile when he asked if I'd enjoyed myself in bed. How my reassurances had probably felt hollow because they were. I should have been honest earlier, I said quietly, before I was so frustrated that it came out like that. You should have, but I also made it hard for you to be honest. Every time you tried to have a real conversation about our relationship, I got defensive or hurt. He sighed. We were both doing our best and both failing each other. The waiter came and took our orders. After he left, Jake reached across the table but didn't quite touch my hand. I still love you, he said. That hasn't changed, but I don't know if we can make this work. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forget what you said about real men, about settling. I was wrong, I said, and I meant it. Real men are men who show up and try and care about their partner's pleasure even when it's hard. Real men go to therapy and work on their issues. Real men are vulnerable enough to admit when they're struggling. Tears were running down my face. You're more of a man than that asshole at the bar who hit on me last week could ever be. Jake's eyebrows went up. Someone hit on you? I turned him down. I wasn't interested because he wasn't you. We sat in silence for a moment. My therapist asked me what I wanted, Jake finally said, and I realized I want to be with someone who chooses me enthusiastically. Not someone who's trying to make it work despite reservations, not someone who wonders if she's settling. He looked at me with those earnest eyes I'd fallen for 2 years ago. Can you honestly say you choose me, all of me including the parts that frustrate you? This was it, the moment of truth. I thought about all the things that had annoyed me about Jake. The indecisiveness, the neediness, the sexual issues. Were those deal breakers, or were they just the normal friction that comes with any real relationship? I thought about his kindness, his patience, the way he remembered my coffee order and my mom's birthday and the names of all my coworkers, the way he'd supported me through my dad's cancer scare and my career change, the way he looked at me like I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Yes, I said, I choose you, not despite the frustrating parts but including them, because everyone has frustrating parts and yours are a lot more bearable than most people's. He smiled a little. That's maybe the most realistic romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm done pretending we're perfect. We're not, we have issues to work on, but I want to work on them with you if you'll let me. The dinner continued and slowly the conversation became easier, more natural. We talked about our therapy revelations, about patterns we'd noticed in ourselves, about how we could communicate better. I think I need you to be more honest with me, Jake said, even if it hurts. Especially if it hurts, because the alternative is you building up resentment until it explodes. And I need you to not fall apart when I am honest, I said gently. I need to be able to tell you I'm frustrated without worrying that you're going to take it as a complete rejection. Deal, but also if you're frustrated, maybe tell me before you tell your friends. I winced. God, yeah, that was. I should have come to you first. Always, I'm sorry I made you feel like the butt of a joke. I'm sorry I made you feel like you couldn't be honest. We left the restaurant without a clear resolution. We weren't broken up, but we weren't exactly back together either. We were in this strange liminal space of wanting to try but being scared of falling into the same patterns. Over the next few weeks we started slow. Coffee dates, walks in the park, gradually rebuilding trust. Jake continued his therapy, and so did I. We read books about communication and attachment styles. It was like we were learning how to be in a relationship for the first time, even though we'd been together for 2 years. The first time we slept together after the break, I was terrified. What if nothing had changed? What if he still finished in 2 minutes and I still felt unsatisfied? What if all this work had been for nothing, but something had changed? Jake was different, more present, more confident. He didn't ask me every 30 seconds if I liked what he was doing. And when he did finish faster than either of us would have liked, he laughed about it instead of spiraling into apologies. Give me 10 minutes, he said, kissing my neck. We've got all night. And we did. It wasn't perfect. Sex is never perfect. But it was real and connected and honest, and that mattered more than stamina. Things got better, not perfect, but better. We learned how to fight more productively. I learned to voice my frustrations before they became resentments. Jake learned to receive criticism without imploding. But here's what I haven't told you yet. The thing I've been avoiding this entire time. 6 months after the incident, we were at a party at Melissa's house. I was in the kitchen getting drinks when I overheard Melissa talking to someone I didn't know. Yeah, she took him back, Melissa was saying. Even after we all told her she could do better, it's kind of sad, honestly. She's just scared of being alone. I stood there frozen, glasses in hand. I mean, the guy finishes in like 30 seconds, Melissa continued. She literally told us she was settling, but I guess she decided settling was better than being single. The other person laughed and I felt rage rising in my chest. This was exactly what I'd done to Jake, reduced him to his worst quality, made him into a punchline for entertainment. But this time I was hearing it from the outside, and I understood viscerally how Jake must have felt. I walked into the room. Hey Melissa, can I talk to you for a second? Her face went white, she knew I'd heard. I pulled her into the hallway. Don't ever talk about Jake like that again. Don't talk about our relationship like that again. In fact, I don't think I want to share private details about my relationship with you anymore at all. Oh, come on, I was just joking. It's not a joke. He's a person I love, and you're reducing him to a single flaw, which, by the way, is something he's been working on in therapy. Not that it's any of your business. Melissa crossed her arms defensively. I'm just being honest. You literally said you were settling. I'm not making this up. I said that in a moment of frustration when I was drunk and being reductive. It wasn't the whole truth, and you've taken it and run with it and decided that's the entire story of our relationship. So what, you're mad at me for listening when you vented? I'm mad at you for turning my relationship into gossip, for disrespecting my partner, for acting like you know better than me what I need. We didn't speak for a month after that. Eventually we reconciled, but our friendship was different, shallower. I realized I'd been using her as a dumping ground for every negative feeling about my relationship while never sharing the good parts. I'd created a version of Jake in her mind that was fundamentally incomplete and unfair. I did the same thing with Rachel and some of my other friends. I stopped using them as a replacement for honest communication with Jake. I stopped performing my relationship frustrations for an audience. It's been a year now since that awful night. Jake and I are still together. We're actually better than we've ever been, which sounds like a click, but it's true. We're more honest, more real, less afraid of conflict. Are we perfect? Hell no. Jake still has moments of insecurity. I still have moments of frustration. We still have to consciously work against our worst patterns. But here's what I learned: every relationship requires settling in some way. Not settling as in compromising your fundamental needs, but settling as in accepting that no person will check every single box. Choosing to love someone fully means choosing to love their flaws along with their strengths. The question isn't whether you're settling. The question is whether what you're gaining is worth what you're not getting. For me, with Jake, it absolutely is. Do I wish he had the sexual stamina of a porn star? Sure, sometimes. Do I wish he was more decisive about choosing restaurants? Yeah, occasionally. But do I wish he was less kind, less supportive, less genuinely invested in my happiness? Never, not for a second. The cruel thing I said that night, that real men last longer, was wrong on so many levels. It reduced masculinity to a single metric. It ignored all the ways Jake showed up as a partner. Weaponized his vulnerability against him. Real men are just men, flawed, struggling, trying their best. Just like real women are just women. We're all stumbling through this, trying to connect with each other despite our damage and our insecurities and our patterns. I think about who I was that night, drunk on wine and validation from my friends, reducing my partner to his worst 30 seconds. I think about the look on Jake's face when he dropped those keys. I can never undo that moment. Those words are always going to be between us, a scar on our relationship that's healed but still visible. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we needed that rupture to rebuild something more honest. Maybe I needed to see the cruelty of my words reflected back at me, both in Jake's devastated face and later in Melissa's gossip, to understand the weight of what I'd done. Sometimes I still feel guilty. I'll be lying in bed next to Jake, watching him sleep, and I'll remember the hollow look in his eyes when he said, "Real men." I'll think about how close I came to losing him because I couldn't handle my own frustration with maturity and honesty. But then he'll wake up and smile at me, and we'll make coffee together, and he'll ask me what I want for breakfast, and I won't feel suffocated by the question anymore. I'll just tell him, and he'll make it, or sometimes he'll surprise me by saying, "Actually, I'm making pancakes today, hope that works for you." And I'll feel this rush of affection for this man who's learning to take up more space while I'm learning to take up less. We're both works in progress. Our relationship is a work in progress, and I'm finally okay with that. I told this whole story because I've seen so many people online defending what I did. Saying I had every right to vent to my friends, that Jake was being too sensitive, that men need to learn to handle criticism about their sexual performance. And maybe there's some truth there. Maybe Jake did need to work on his defensiveness. Maybe I did need to be more honest about my needs. But there's a difference between honest communication and cruel mockery. There's a difference between venting to friends and turning your partner into a punchline. There's a difference between expressing dissatisfaction and announcing you're settling. I crossed those lines, and I almost lost someone extraordinary because of it. So if you're reading this and you're frustrated with your partner, please learn from my mistake. Talk to them first. Be honest but kind. Don't reduce them to their worst quality. Don't perform your relationship problems for an audience. And if you do mess up the way I did, own it completely. Don't make excuses or blame the alcohol or justify it as just venting. Understand the full weight of what you've done and work to rebuild the trust you broke. Jake and I are planning to move in together again next month. We've been living separately since the break, but we're ready now. Ready to wake up together every morning and navigate the small annoyances and the big joys side by side. Last week he brought up the idea of couples therapy, not because we're struggling but because we want to keep getting better. I nearly cried at the suggestion, This man who used to avoid any hint of criticism is now proactively seeking tools to improve our relationship. We're also planning a trip to Italy for our 3-year anniversary. 3 years since we first got together. 1 year since we almost ended. A lifetime ahead of us if we keep doing the work. I'm not the same person I was that night. I'm more honest, more direct, more aware of my patterns. I'm better at sitting with discomfort instead of venting it away to anyone who will listen. And Jake's not the same either. He's more confident, more secure, more willing to take up space. We broke ourselves open that night, but maybe we needed to break before we could rebuild into something stronger. I still think about what I said sometimes. Real men last longer. The words make me cringe even now. But they also remind me of how far we've both come, and how close I came to throwing away something real because I was chasing some fantasy of perfection that doesn't exist. Nobody's perfect. No relationship is perfect. We're all just doing our best with the tools we have and the damage we carry. The question is whether you're willing to do the work, whether you're willing to be honest and vulnerable and accountable, whether you're willing to choose someone fully and completely, flaws and all. I choose Jake. Every day I choose him, and every day he chooses me back, and that, I've learned, is what real love actually looks like.